Hey everyone, Anil from Live, Breathe, Believe with my man Fred. Afternoon, Fred. How you doing?
Good afternoon, Anil. I'm doing good.
So, Fred, it's Wednesday. How's your week been going so far?
It's been good. A couple of new opportunities, focused on work. It's been very cold here, but maybe we shouldn't talk about the weather.
Not today. I mean, but now that you brought it up, cold. What is it like? Single digits?
Yeah, for sure. Getting close to zero.
Oof.
Like my thighs get cold when I wear jeans when I walk outside. So
Ooh,
really cold.
no, that's a share.
Yeah. Was that too much?
No. It's like, I actually went for a run at lunch, and I wore like my running shorts, and my girlfriend was like, "Aren't you gonna be cold in those?" And I was like, "No,
Mm.
I'll be running. I'll be warm up top, and I'll see what happens as I get out there." But lucked out.
You've become British now.
Not, I'll tell you. Well, you can see from my tan, like or the lack thereof. Man, it is weird though. I started this week, last 2 days, man, just feeling a bit like not groggy, but a bit like slow start to the morning.
Mm,
And I am always going to link it back to, I do feel gray clouds just can have a effect, cold air. It just has an effect on the body and the mind.
for sure.
You know? But well, hey, let's talk about the rest of the week, man. Is it busy until Friday, or is it pretty
It's pretty relaxed. So I'm working tomorrow and I'm actually taking Friday off
nice one, man?
to go for brunch and things like that. So
Ah,
fun.
see,
Yeah.
living the life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving, so going to spend the afternoon, evening, just taking a bit of a breather. And I've ordered a nice meal from Whole Foods, so turkey and stuffing
Nice.
and pumpkin pie. Happy days.
Amazing.
Um, so Fred, I again, we've had a list of conversations, our list of topics we wanted to discuss. We've talked about procrastination and anxiety. We've talked about authentic leadership. We've talked about integrity. I love this chemistry we've got in terms of these topics that we delve into. And today we want to talk about ego. And it's one that, I'll be honest, makes me a bit nervous. And I'll tell you more why as we go through the chat. But I
Hmm.
feel ego is some people could take this conversation and go, you guys are trying to be too humble. Come on. Some people might take this conversation and go, oh, didn't think about that. Fred, I just kind of wanted to open up to you. And when you think about ego, yeah, what goes through your mind?
Yeah. The reason why I put it on the list was it's one of these recurring topics, isn't it? Like we
Mm-hmm.
both have some understanding of what ego is and the types of problems that it causes in our life. And I think that if you have a clear understanding of what the ego is, a very basic, nothing too academic or fancy, but just a simple understanding of what we're actually talking about, you understand a lot about why people behave the way they do and why we ourselves behave the way we do. And often it's the stuff that has the negative outcomes and where we get, confused, conflicted, self-destructive. So that's why I think it's a super interesting topic where there are some kind of helpful insights that I've come across over the past few years.
I want to go straight to the word you used just now, self-destructive. Um, what from experience, personal or professional, uh, like leads you to thinking about ego being self-destructive?
So I think it comes back to just quickly what the ego is in a very basic sense is the story we tell ourselves about ourselves, and hence also the story we tell others about ourselves. So in that way, it's identity, it's memory, it's thought. We identify with certain things, and then if that story, if that narrative is challenged, we feel like we have to react in some way.
Hmm.
So, and of course, the crazier or the more unrealistic and untrue the story we tell ourselves about ourselves is, the more of a problem it's going to cause. If someone says, look, you're actually not very good at that. Now, if I've built my whole identity on my sense that I'm good at something and someone tells me I'm not going to take that well. I'm going to have to call them an idiot. I'm going to have to say that I'm offended. You know, it's this idea of being offended as well, right? Which part of us is getting offended? It's not, you know, if someone says we have very skinny arms, it's not the arm that gets offended. It's this part of our ego that had another story. And so we have to start making acrobatics to, you know, get around that, or to reconcile, or to keep our story intact.
I love that, acrobatics, because I think of it and it's like, you're right. It's like suddenly it's like, oh crap, and, you know, and you're like dodging and you're kind of
Mm-hmm.
ducking and you're trying to like catch, you know, it's the, because I think about it as you said, pride, right? It's like someone makes a comment and, ooh, you've just bruised my pride, and now I need to save face. It's like you've challenged me, and now I need to almost kind of, you backpedal because you don't feel self assured about it,
Mm-hmm.
and you're suddenly like, again, like you said, it's like you're gonna have to pull things out of God knows where, under the, out of the woodwork, to defend your position, to almost justify your story.
Yeah, yeah. And the sad thing is, of course, even if what, you know, in this kind of scenario that we're talking about, where someone is critical or offended us, maybe they have no clue about who we are. And then, of course, there is no reason to, it says a lot about us if we get sensitive when someone who doesn't know us criticizes us. Or maybe someone says something and we genuinely look inside and find that it's not true. Or we find that this is a person who knows us and what they're saying is actually true. Then, of course, the best thing we can do is to really take that in and to figure out how we're going to change to, you know, accommodate that new truth that's been served to us.
You know, so you say truth that's been served to us, which makes me think that was that story that you told that person that either you do know or don't know a lie.
Yeah, yeah.
And I
I
think,
think that's what it is. There's some, with this ego and identity, there is some type of self delusion. And
mhm,
of course, you know, if there isn't, that's great. And I think there's like, also, we already mentioned integrity and pride. And
mhm,
I think they come into the picture as well, where integrity is super important. And pride, to a certain extent, is a good thing. And a kind of well manicured uh, ego is also not a bad thing. There's also a lot of talk about like ego death, you know, spiritual circles, that kind of thing, and that the ego is all bad. I don't think it's necessarily all bad. I think there is, as I said, integrity is super important. A sense of pride uh, is also very good, and a reasonable ego, I think, is also healthy.
see, and I think sometimes I get lost in semantics because, like,
Mm-hmm.
you say, hey, some ego is good.
Yeah.
So a book that I have encouraged folks to pick up and read is "Ego is the Enemy" by Ryan Holiday, and I encouraged actually a former manager to read this book, and he ended up buying it for the whole team. I'm not sure how many people from the team have read it or not, but I picked it up the other day and was kind of flipping through it, and it's, you know, there's a difference between, like, in my opinion, ego versus ambition. Like, you know, ego is kind of almost like you said, it's a story you told yourself, that you believe is true, and therefore you're going to take steps and measures to convince people it's true. Versus ambition, which is founded on substance, on achievements, things that you've
Mm.
actually done and delivered. And, you know, so I go back to your point in terms of, hey, I think a bit of ego that allows you almost to kind of push the dial a bit, move the needle, is healthy. But I think that majority fall off the deep end. It's almost
Sure.
like they're unable to keep that ego in check. You know, some people say,
Mm.
hey, keep your ego in check. It's like, okay, some people struggle with that. Why do you think that is? So, like, what separates people, in your opinion, like, from having, let's say, you know, a healthy ego to an unhealthy ego?
Mm-hmm. I think part of it is that it's so difficult to see how we truly are. And I think it starts from an early age, in that we develop defense mechanisms and tools to deal with the situations that we encounter in life. And of course, when we're children, this ability is a bit limited, and hopefully it gets better. But we develop this kind of toolkit, and it might include things like aggression, reacting aggressively to a situation to make it stop. Maybe there's a place for that, but if we start over relying on it, it becomes a go to tool, and we apply it to new situations in adulthood where there would have been much better tools or defense mechanisms to go to. So I think for those two reasons, it's like we develop this limited toolkit, and we um, have this sense of identity that's very easy to cook up. Whereas to have a real assessment, if you want to be successful, there's every opportunity to be successful. And you do those things and you say, yeah, I was ambitious and I achieved my ambitions. And that's kind of a, tick in the box and something I'm proud of. You wanted to build something, you built it, and you look back and it's cool, right? That's amazing. But to tell yourself that you've built a lot of things when actually you haven't, then it's more delusional.
I hear you, and I agree. And I think it's almost like if you were building like I'm drawing out as we speak like a spectrum. It's like you've got delusion, you've got and you maybe on one end you got like achievement or ambition at the other end. So delusion is like that. It's BS. It's made out of thin air, and it's like something that you've just created in your mind for whatever. Maybe hey, positive check. You've got a great imagination, but a really bad ego. On the other side, you've got achievement, where it's like I've got substance. I've actually delivered something, and there's a tangible result to it. And then there's everything in between. And you're right. I feel that sometimes people, going back to what you just said about success, is people either pursue it rather than letting it ensue. And again, something I read, and I love this quote, says that like happiness, success ensues, it is not pursued. I think that's why when you kind of say like people will pursue success and they'll kind of create this story, this imagination to kind of almost prove to someone, yeah, I'm a successful person. Believe me, put your faith in me. They're suddenly hoping that that'll allow them to grab on to something, as opposed to really, it's almost like it's an illusion. It disappears. It doesn't really exist.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a big part of that is also like how you deal with failure. Because if someone calls you out and said that you screwed something up, how do you take that? We all screw things up. And if we're able to say that, yeah, I actually didn't do a very good job there, or, I did A, in hindsight, I probably should have done B, then you can learn and you can develop. But that's an example of where the ego gets in the way of the learning. If you have to prove to yourself and everyone that actually you didn't make a mistake at all, actually you weren't, weak or flawed or just, made a bad decision or something like that, that's also how it really gets in the way.
I'm actually, as you say that, I'm trying to think to how I almost let my ego get in the way. And I know it's happened in different moments. And I think it's important that someone, and not to go back to kind of the early parts of their career, can feel comfortable to deal with failure and to own up to it and not let their ego or external influences kind of get in the way of that. Because I know in the early stage of my career, actually, no, I'm just going to say it. Like yesterday, I was having a conversation with a colleague, and in the evening, and we were chatting, and he brought some. We were talking about a topic, and I'm kind of like in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, did I mess this up by not raising this? A month ago, 6 weeks ago. Okay, but wait, no, actually, they should have caught on to that when they were first doing their part. So actually, no, I'm okay. I could, if it came back to me, I could always say that. And then while he and I were talking, so again, this is happening in my head. And then he made a comment. He's like, well, actually, maybe we could do this. And I was like, I suggested that last week in an email. And now you're, see, I'm going to call you out on it. And I'm like, and it's just funny how in my mind, I'm trying to almost defend and protect at the same time. And I imagine, to your point, that's just a minor one example, but I'm sure people have far greater examples where they don't know how to deal with failure.
Yeah.
Ego gets in the way of it.
Yeah. And I think it's tricky in a lot of environments as well, where we are punished for making mistakes and that kind of thing, right? Then also you're not encouraged to do it. So it kind of boosts the whole thing. idea of having like this wall or this facade, and you cannot admit weakness or fault because people are going to jump on it.
See, which is crazy. John Maxwell.
Mm.
I love that guy. Whenever he talks about leadership, the number one thing he says is failure. Fail fast, fail quick, fail early, and learn from that failure, own up to it, and move on. And that's where you get, not more than experience. You learn from that experience, and that's what's going to move you ahead.
Yeah.
It's crazy that we have to think that people shouldn't be not only encouraged to fail, but just to have that moment to understand it, as
Yeah.
opposed to feel like you said, ooh, bruised pride, bruised ego. Let me just brush that under the rug and move on. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. And it also leads us then to not apologize when we should apologize, and that creates some resentment and some dirt in relationships. Whereas apologizing and setting things right is one of the most healing things you can do, both for yourself and other people involved on those occasions um, when we have screwed up.
I feel relationships can absolutely benefit from this, because I know like we're giving examples in like the professional sphere, but
Mm-hmm.
you think about in a relationship, if one partner can't say to the other, yeah, I cocked that up, my bad, I'm sorry, and then again, cool, acknowledge it, move on. It almost, that could be the cause of a tear, of a fight, of an
Yeah.
argument.
Yeah.
Like, well, let me remind you the time you messed up and how did you feel, and it suddenly like
Mm-hmm.
becomes a bit of a finger point, like,
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
you just, it's just like it's going to be explosive. There's no resolution. If anything, it's only going to be escalation.
Absolutely. You see there how a dynamic develops, where there's either like finger pointing or these kind of attacks, or I don't want to point something out because then you might point out the thing that I did. So you get like a weaker engagement where it's more like, entrenched. And I think both of those are kind of negative spirals.
See, and that's we bring it back to pride, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's pride gets in the way of personal relationships, business relationships. Fred, what is that? Is that something that's like from someone's upbringing, from your experience? Is that something that we just develop as we go on? What is the cause
Yeah.
of that? Like, what do you think?
That's a good question. Um, I do think both ego and pride are some kind of programming. It is some type of self-preservation, but it comes at the expense of other things. Maybe it's like survival over happiness or something like that. Um, where again, if you're an accountant and you're very good at your job, and you eat healthy food and you take care of your body, there's no reason why you shouldn't be proud of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Proud of your achievements as an accountant, and proud of your physique and good health. But if I mean, pride, I guess, is one of the seven deadly sins, right? So there should be something more wrong with it. I feel like I'm being a little bit too positive about it, but it's something like half of it is good if it's based in reality, and if it makes you, um, if it kind of gets you on, it helps you to go after new goals. It like helps you to set a direction in terms of what you want to become. That part is good. If it says like, my pride did not allow me to apologize,
Mm-hmm.
then it seems like it's causing some problems. Or my pride did not, I was too proud to admit that I was wrong. Then it's kind of in this bad pride, bad ego side, where it's actually getting in the way. And this concept you created, it doesn't care about your health, doesn't care about your relationships, doesn't care about your success. It's actually very short term and petty in terms of caring about itself, that you had pride in something that was unearned, or your ego created a story that wasn't true. And that's where I think it gets people into trouble. I mean, we do have this thing where you wake up every morning, right? And you have to remember who you are. So it is something like you boot up in the morning and you have to recall what was important to me. What were my values? What was I doing? Who are these people? And I think that's an interesting kind of thought experiment that there is a lot of truth to. You do have to do that every morning.
I want to pause on that, and I love that because that's such a great analogy, mate. When you wake up, it's almost like there's a reason why you put your computer to sleep or to standby,
Mm-hmm.
or you power it down. When you wake up in the morning, you're right. The first thing is like, first off, like, okay, where am I? Okay, so who am I? All right, so what is it that's like motivating me? What is important to me? Because I always use that expression, like, jump out of bed. What are you jumping out of bed for? Or if you're staying in bed, what are you nervous about that's keeping you in bed? And I love that. So that's actually a really good analogy, mate, because I think that's what a computer is probably doing, versus our neural net processor in our head.
Yeah, yeah. So because the other side of that also is about integrity, or maybe lack of integrity, where I find sometimes ego gets a bad rap, and um, there is this idea of like ego death would be a good thing and so on. But then you have to pretend like you don't have goals, you don't have desires, and I think that also becomes problematic. So as we were saying, at one end of the spectrum, you have a total egomaniac, but at the other end of the spectrum, you have a pushover who's not standing up for themselves. And so that's why I like the half of it, or the part that is integrity, about saying no, about not letting people do things to you that you will regret, or that you don't want them to do, about standing up for certain values and principles. That also fits in, and that's very important. That's also part of our identity that we have to protect.
I don't want to say that I disagree with you, but I'm going to.
Yeah, go
Let's see
for
if
it.
I do. Let's see if it's
Mm-hmm.
just maybe tomato.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for me, the reason why I know you say ego gets a bad rep. The reason why I feel like it's a bad rep is because I think there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance, ambition and ego, and I think when we go back to kind of what is the ego, without going into the whole, let's say, psychology of ego, and I think it's just surface, keeping it simple. Ego is a bit self-delusion. It's a bit storytelling. It's a lie. It's a narrative. It's something you're feeding yourself to prove why you should be. I'm not going to get political, but I am. You take Trump, right? Smart guy. Yeah, whatever people think about him and
Mm-hmm.
think about him, he's a smart guy. He wouldn't have gotten to where he's gotten to if he was a moron. But again, we'll leave people to their opinions. He, in my opinion, became president. Does he know the first thing about being a president? No. But did his ego drive him to go, yeah, I'm going to be president. I'm going to be president. And he became president. And now it's like, but does the guy know all about what that means? No, in my opinion, it doesn't.
Mm.
So he's been driven by ego rather than, okay, I don't know any other successful presidents. Again, people can have their opinions,
Mm-hmm.
versus someone who's actually, developed a tried and tested set of achievements. They're ambitious, but their ambitions are based on stepping stones that get them to a certain point. And that's where I'm kind of like, that person deserves to be in that position, because it's not their ego that got them there, or they bulldozed to get there, but
Mm-hmm.
actually have tried and tested, you know, achievements, failures, learnings. They're open about it. They're honest about it. And that's what gets them there. Now, whether the political sphere invites that transparency, probably not.
Mm.
But that's at least just an example I see where ego is the enemy.
Yeah, yeah. And I totally agree with that. And I think that that is kind of the bad half of it. And you can see that in the sense, if an advisor comes along and tells Trump that he's amazing and he's the best ever, Trump is probably going to be like, this is a good guy, don't care about any of the other merits. It's
Inflate my
like,
ego.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Trump's ego is going to tell him, like, dude, keep this guy around. He's good for us. He's good. He's helping us. Uh, whereas someone who had more humility would perhaps get, an advisor who is more competent, but could also be more critical because this advisor knows more than you do about their topic. It's what they say, like, an A leader hires an A team and a B leader hires a C team, you know, that kind of thing. And I think it comes back to one of the reasons that that's true is because of the ego. You have to surround yourself with people who are better than you and not be threatened by that. And yeah, so I think that's one of the negative outcomes of someone, without naming any names, who've built their career on like pure ego and manipulation and fear and intimidation and so on. So that part we definitely agree about.
Okay.
I was curious about your disagreement. So
No, I think because I think I just find ego. You know, you kind of mentioned it twice, that the ego and the death of the ego. And I guess in my mind, if the death of the ego means the rise of humility, ambition, confidence, stepping stones, building blocks
mm.
that allow people to kind of grow and not only be a
Sure,
student,
okay,
be a
yeah,
teacher, and one day be a teacher and again be a student. I feel that's where I see, the progression. I just and maybe I'm just also a bit like, I just, when I hear ego. So let me actually go a step back. And I mentioned at the start that this is an easy conversation for me because so at some point I'm going to talk about my dad on a podcast separately, because I feel like my dad is, I love the guy. He's amazing. He's done an incredible amount. And just in a highlight, like the guy landed in the US with $10 in his pocket, made millions, lost it, and he's still moved on and he's still doing what he's doing. And he's never had a heart attack. He's never had health issues. And so, despite everything he's gone through, and I'm like, the guy is resilience, hand over heart, absolute resilience. And there's something he would always say to people. He's like, I don't have an ego, and then he would kind of share what he's done. And there are times where I'm kind of like, okay, because I've always associated that with my dad of like, he doesn't have an ego, but then he says stuff that I'm like, is that really, I have to remember, like, actually he does have achievements. He has done a lot. He's not delusional. And so
mm.
that's why I just, anytime I hear like someone say ego, I'm like, oh, but my dad didn't have an ego. Or did he? No, he didn't.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
achieved things. And
mm-hmm.
that's just, that
Sure,
word
yeah, yeah,
ego has stuck with me as I'd rather be humble and let my achievements speak for themselves. And if someone compliments me, great, but I'm not going to go out and seek it. And my father never went out seeking compliments or, that
yeah, yeah.
ego massage. And so I think that's just why I've just got I've got a bad rap when it comes to ego and that word. So
and,
maybe I'm a bit
yeah, yeah. And I mean, part of that might just be semantics, and it's kind of tricky to define these things. But I just wanted to kind of salvage some part of, if ego is this identity and story of self, it's not bad to have that.
Mhm.
It's only bad if it takes over and if it guides you to do bad things, or to, not apologize, or to ruin relationships. Whereas, coming back to this, a humble person who takes pride in their appearance and in their professional work and achievements, that is technically ego, but it's healthy ego. That's how I would summarize it.
So, and I agree with you. I think ego is not bad, in that you can take pride in great work.
Mm-hmm.
If you've done great work, or if your team's done great work, or if your kid's done great work, you can take pride in it. And we do
Yes.
take pride with ego, and that's okay. Like it's and I bet you if someone knocks your kid
Mm.
for their achievement, you'll be like, oh, ho, ho,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
bruise is gonna
sure.
hit. You'll be like, I'm
Yeah,
ready
yeah.
to. So you're right. Like there
And
is
that's
that.
probably not wrong either. That there are some things worth fighting for. And so a kind of silly example is like, we all comb our hair, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, we kind of care what people think, and it's not wrong to want to come across in a certain way professionally. We wear certain clothes, we comb our hair. We say, yeah, I think that's what's kind of expected. You kind of play ball a little bit.
No, and that's fair. I think, and that's where I will agree with you. I think that taking pride in something, caring what other people think, taking pride in how you look, how you're presented, how you come across, your own brand, or the brand of your children
Yes. Mm-hmm.
or of your family. There's honor in it, and there's like you said, pride, and therefore you
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
ego. You're going to feel like
Yes.
just puffed a bit, like I am proud of my family. And people shouldn't deflate that. We should
Exactly.
give
Yeah.
people the
Yeah.
opportunity to Yeah.
Exactly. That's why I want to salvage a bit of,
Yeah.
positive ego, to say that we cannot pretend like we're throwing it all out of the window in terms of professional ambition, in terms of pride in things we've achieved, and so on. Those things are good and healthy.
No, but I think, and that's fair. I think, but it's funny, man. I think that's just, it's the world has a tendency to twist things, right? So whether your
Hmm.
upbringing twists it, or your perception of how you see things or how it's relayed to you, there's positive ego and there's negative ego. There's
Mm.
positive ego that's based on substance, that's based on pride, on family, on values, on honor, on whatever. And then there's the other side, which is delusion and lies. And it's unfortunate how that side is almost casting this massive shadow on the other.
Yes,
So
exactly. Yeah,
even
yeah,
like someone like myself will go, I disagree with you, Fred.
yeah,
Ego's bad. And you're like, no, mate, think about it. Like you almost have
exactly.
to kind of parcel through and
I,
see.
I I think I think that's a great summary, and that's why I want to come back to integrity. Because if you throw out all of ego out the window, you might be inclined to throw out integrity as well. If someone is like very aggressive with you, and you say, "Oh, I don't mind. I don't have an ego. They can say whatever they want," but maybe it actually makes you feel bad. Maybe it actually puts you in a bad position. And again, that part of ego might be called integrity, and I think it's very important. I've heard, for example, a couple of great stories of people, when someone kind of grabbed them by the arm or pushed them, they say, "Stop, don't touch me." And, that's also something which I think is very effective. It's good to learn. And you don't have to say, like, "Oh, I don't mind, I don't care, I don't have an ego," to everything. Maybe we should defend ourselves and be honest, and have these values and principles that are also then part of our identity.
So bear with me for a second. I agree with you. I think that if someone's a pushover, defenseless, weak, if you almost kind of take that away, like take the oomph away from them, you deflate that chest and go kind of cower. Don't chest out.
Hmm.
You are you're gonna lose that person and what that person can offer, that integrity, that the value, that yeah, passion. But now I'm gonna flip to this and go Mahatma Gandhi.
Hmm.
This is a guy who's like, look, you slap me on one cheek, I'll give you the other, right? And he obviously wanted to make a statement that, in his own right, I'm not going to fight back. How do you manage like that? What he did and what he embodied
Hmm.
versus, let's say, you're walking down the street and a guy comes up to you and punches you and you're ready to fucking throw down. What's the how do we kind of almost give
Yeah,
a
yeah.
bit of semblance to that idea?
It's a great question. I feel like perhaps I don't know enough of his story, but basically, like, peaceful resistance is still very much a resistance. He
Mm-hmm.
was certainly not like going along,
Mm-hmm.
right? He was certainly not saying things that he didn't believe in to avoid trouble or something like that. He was very much, I guess, sitting in the middle of the street and causing trouble, and sharing his ideas of what he thought was right and fair. He just wasn't punching anyone. And I think that's great in terms of keeping it in the realm of ideas and values and so on, and not, you know, uh, getting into a war.
Fred, that's brilliant, mate. I just hats off on that because, like you said, the story, but irrespective, I think peaceful resistance and just how you said, like ideas and values, like, if he's taking a physical hit, it's like, if anything, it's probably like, look, you can hit me physically, but my values are still the same.
Mm.
I'm not going to fight back because that's against my values. So if I fight back, I'm actually attacking my own values rather than just go ahead. It is, and I love that. I think that's powerful. Like peaceful resistance, and that was what he believed in, and that's what allowed him to do what he did without ego and really make that impact.
Mm.
I Yeah, you got me. Well played, sir. Um, So taking it back kind of full circle. So when you think of ego, Fred, and again, kind of going back to the start of why we wanted to have this conversation, hey, there's your side with like, hey guys, there's good ego and there's ego that needs to remain intact and we need to salvage that. because in today's day and age, there's this shadow that's casting, a wider shadow on good ego. In the absence of good ego, you're going to have people that are kind of feel weak, feel defenseless, not feel pride, not feel that mojo that allows them to really stand for what they believe in and really bring about change and good and whatnot. I think the other side of ego, which I think is the negative side, is where it's based on lies. It's based on delusions. It's not built on substance. And I guess, Fred, what would you want people to take away from this? Like, would you how would you advise them to nurture
Mm.
healthy, good ego?
Yeah, yeah. I think to be reflective about what you identify with. Um, so to really develop good values and to say that these things are important to me, and I find that they make my life better when I adhere to my values, and it's something when you do that you can be proud of. And to notice when some sense of offense uh, is awoken by someone else, and to if someone calls you dishonest, if you really work on your honesty and you really feel that you're a very honest person, it doesn't actually hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But if you know you're a liar and someone calls you a liar, the only part of you that's objecting is the ego. And so I think it's that kind of balance and self-reflection to be honest about the good and the bad there, the what is reality, what you're actually building, and what is um, delusion or not really based in reality.
Can I add to that? So
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned be reflective of what you can identify with, know it, be proud of it, balance and self-reflection. I want to add another part to it, which is not to take off to breathe and believe. Take a second, breathe. Someone's made a comment to you, calling you out, calling you dishonest, challenging and questioning your family or your kids or your own work, whatever it may be. Just breathe. You don't have to respond immediately. But when you do respond, believe in yourself. Know what you've achieved, know what you've done, know what you stand for, know what you're saying is built on, based on substance. It's not bullshit. And I think as soon as you can believe in yourself, you can then respond in, ideally, a way that just demonstrates your integrity, your values, and what you stand for, and be proud of it, and chest out, but not ready to fight, but just to kind of to stand for what you believe in and what you know holds true.
Mm.
That's fair, man. You got me. So you've got one convert over here of having a healthy ego, and that ego can be positive,
Yes.
and just finding that and not losing sight of it. Awesome. Um, Fred, on the flip side, what advice would you give to people who fall into that unhealthy ego and struggle to find their footing,
Mm.
find that substance that can allow them to feel like they don't have to lie, they don't have to feel delusional, they don't have to be dishonest or fight back? What? Because again, I've been in that situation. What would be your advice to
Yeah,
me
yeah.
in those moments?
I think it's a little bit complicated because the best way is to find, and I think everyone can find this, that there are a few things that we can really experience directly, and then there's everything else that we kind of created in our thinking mind. And the ego is this kind of concept and creation. And once you see that you created it, you also see that you can change it. Like when you get the classic example is like in traffic, someone cuts you off in traffic, and you get offended and you feel like they've done something against you. And then the point is like with more maturity, you realize that you don't know where they're coming from. Maybe they're on the way to the hospital and all this stuff, and then you see it from their point of view. And when you start to see that your ego no longer gets hurt by this perceived offense, and to be honest, I think it goes even further. Because even if they're not on the way to the hospital, maybe they're just a little bit careless, or maybe they are an asshole that cuts people off in traffic, and there's still no reason to get offended. Um, and so you have those kind of exercises and those things in life where if you see that you're getting in your own way, it is possible to reflect and to find that, your nose can get hurt, your elbow can get hurt, uh, but when you look inside, what actually gets hurt when you feel offended, and that kind of exercise, um, I think will lead you to see that you can retell this story and you can actively and consciously shape the story of identity and pride and integrity and ego.
Love it. I'll give you an example. Cycling. If I'm about to get hit by a car, or like, pedestrian, or, or another cyclist, and you're like, it's like, I know sometimes think I'm in that moment, I'm cycling, so the adrenaline's pumping, and so I'm probably just reacting. Today, when I went for a run on the canal, cyclist just literally woos by, and I want to be like, what are you doing? It's a tow path. It's not a road, and then you're just kind of like, ooh, chill, dude. Like, just again, it goes back to the advice you gave earlier. Self-reflect, like, what's going on here? Like, what's happening to me, or what got her? How did I get offended? Like, what happened? Like, and just find balance. Like, just balance. It's like, okay, like, sometimes you don't need to tip the scale all the way into the shit. Like, just bring it back. They gave shit, you don't give shit, and it'll balance out and it'll smooth over, as opposed to just forcing yourself into that side and almost kind of causing a bit more chaos, or a bit more angst, or more negative energy than needs.
Exactly. And I think there's also a difference between, like, if you're in a relationship of any kind where you feel like you're constantly getting a bum deal, then it will be a time to stand up for yourself and to put some boundaries down and to protect your integrity. But if it's a passing cyclist, it's just a moment that's passed, and there's nothing you can do to improve your life by reacting to it.
I agree. I love how you've said it several times, and I've written literally integrity. Integrity. It really does come back to that. And I think how you leverage your ego is a reflection of your integrity. And the stronger your integrity, the stronger your ego, the healthier your ego. If you have less integrity, you're probably going to have a weaker ego. And if you have a weaker ego, it's going to tip you to the side of the dark side of the force when it comes to that ego. Fred, that was absolutely brilliant, mate. I really appreciate that. You've opened my perspective to a side of ego that I've not thought of, and Mr. Holiday didn't do that. You did. So chapeau, sir. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Really appreciate that. Any final thoughts or words, mate, for the folks?
This is something just else related to that I wanted to mention. I think it's interesting kind of game that you can play with yourself to see what you identify with and how language works. For example, in English you say I am hungry, and in German you say ich habe Hunger. I have hunger, and it's something very different to have something or to be something. And if you say all these words that and expressions that come back to I am and identity in that sense, maybe it's innocent, but maybe there is something with some deep intention in terms of how we use language that's also worth thinking about. That most of these things are something that you have temporarily. It's not something that you are permanently, and I think that can be a great relief too.
I want to add to that. So I had a conversation with my sister however long ago. I was in Amsterdam, had a really shit day, and I remember I was meeting someone for a drink at a pub that's just on the top of the red light district. I'm adding this more for dramatic effect. No, I'm just kidding. But I really was. I was standing on the canal, just over the canal, red light district in Amsterdam, about to go to this pub, and my sister was like, "So how you feeling?" And I said, "I'm angry. I'm annoyed. I'm frustrated." And she's like, "You feel angry, you feel frustrated, you feel annoyed. It's a feeling, and that feeling will pass."
Yeah.
And I really like how you said that, Fred. Like it's language.
Yeah. And you can play with it, right?
Yeah.
And you see if it feels different. Like
Yeah.
I have this feeling at this moment
Hmm.
feels very different than I am.
Yeah. Man, it's interesting how you wonder how a different culture, like the Germanic culture with I have hunger versus, let's say, the English culture with I am hungry, how it could be reflective of that and like the identity of a
Yeah, yeah.
person, and therefore the language they choose to use. Um, I'm not going to delve into that. If that was deep,
Mm.
thumbs up, but I'm not. That's too deep for me. That's for sure.
Well, think about it and maybe talk more about that another time.
I think so too. Any other thoughts, Fred?
No, I'm very happy with that.
Mate, this was great. I really do appreciate it, Fred. Again, just to recap a few thoughts. So we think about there's good ego. I'm now convinced, and there's bad ego. Good ego. It's built on integrity. It's built on substance. It's built on pride, but healthy pride. Pride for something that you stand for and that you need to stand up for. Not bow down or back down and cower. Pump the chest out. There's the bad ego that is listed by um, delusions, lies, things that don't really truly exist. And some people that we know that I've referenced already use it to get to a point and then don't have the substance or the knowledge to really lead in the most effective way possible. Um, I think we talked about that balance between confidence versus arrogance, ambition versus ego. I loved your advice, Fred, in terms of if you feel like you're someone who wants to have a healthy ego, it's all about balance and reflection. And what I added to that, which is breathe and believe. If you're on the other side of it and you feel like you have an unhealthy ego, again, reflect. Just kind of understand what gets you hurt when you've been offended. If someone's questioned your story or they've dishonored you in traffic, just pause, reflect, understand, and don't give into it, balance it out. Sometimes that negative energy that's thrown at you just needs to be balanced out with some positive energy that can come from you. And then, as you rightly said at the end here, mate, the whole identity and language and how you identify with the language that you or we use, it can have an effect on how we think and how we feel, and on our ego. So let's all commit to nurturing a good and healthy ego. Well, yeah.
Wonderful summary. Thank you.
My pleasure, Fred. Fred, as always, thank you. I've mentioned this before, fredriksamanta.com. Please get in touch with him. He's a brilliant guy. He's a close friend of mine, lives in Zurich, but he can be reached as you see fit. Questions and comments. Fred and I have done a few of these so far. We're open to your feedback and comments. So if you found us on LinkedIn, please leave your comments, your questions. I'll put an audio version of this up so you can listen to it as a podcast. It'll be up on YouTube. Comments, questions, constructive critiques on how we can improve our dynamic.
That'd be
Any
great.
topics
Yeah.
or questions, that you guys would like to have answered. Appreciate those of you that have reached out. I'm going to leave with my final thought, which is the mission of Live, Breathe, Believe, and that is know you to be you. And we hope that this conversation on ego enabled that. So with that, thank you very much, Fred.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Big hugs and heaps of love.